Hi, and welcome to the Electoral Commission of South Australia's candidate briefing for council elections. Becoming a councillor is a great way to represent and help improve your community. This briefing will help you understand how to nominate correctly and how elections work. The topics that will be covered in this briefing are the election timetable, candidate eligibility, how to nominate, campaign donations returns, responsibilities when campaigning, how the voting process works, the scrutiny and counting process. This briefing does not cover what it's like to be a member of council. If you want to learn more about life as an elected council member, you can read the Local Government Association of South Australia's Make a Difference Guide, which is on the EXA and LGA websites and also included in the nominations kit. Now we will talk through the election timetable, starting at the top. The roll is the list of names of people who are entitled to vote and who will be sent a voting pack. Nominations open is when you are first able to submit your nomination to run as a candidate. 12 noon on nominations close is the deadline for submitting your nomination. The ballot paper draw will occur at 4 p.m. or as soon as reasonably practicable after 4 p.m. on the day of the close of nominations. The mail-out period is when the voting packs are sent out in the mail. Most packs are usually sent on the first day, so many will start arriving in letterboxes as soon as the next day. Close of voting is the deadline for when votes must be returned to us in the mail or placed in the ballot box at the council office. Scrutiny and count is when the scrutiny and count commences and the votes are counted to determine who is elected. The preliminary scrutiny commences with checking the envelope and removing the declaration flap to ensure the secrecy of the voter's identity is maintained. Remove ballot papers from the envelopes and check for formality. When completed, the count will commence. We will talk through each of these important dates in more detail later in this presentation. Throughout this presentation, you will see page references in the top right corner. The page numbers will relate to the topic we are discussing and where you can find more information in the Candidate Handbook. The Candidate Handbook is available on our website and will be included in the nomination kit. It is recommended candidates read the handbook before submitting their nomination to ensure they have covered the necessary legislative requirements. So now, let's move on to our second topic. Are you eligible to nominate as a candidate? To be eligible to run for council, you must be an Australian citizen, and at the time of the close of roll, you must also be an elector for the council area or a nominated person for a body corporate or group, either of which has its name on the voters' roll for the area. Changes to legislation mean that the term nominated person replaces the term designated person. If you have been left off the voters' roll in error, you may also be able to nominate following the completion of an omission in error form. There are also a list of reasons that will make you ineligible to be a candidate. Your nomination will not be accepted if you are a member of an Australian Parliament, including any state or territory parliament, are an undischarged bankrupt or benefiting from a law for the relief of insolvent debtors, are an employee of the council, are disqualified from election by court order, have been sentenced to imprisonment and are, or could become, liable to serve the sentence or the remainder of the sentence. Now let's move on to our next topic, how to lodge a nomination. First, you will need to get a nomination kit. The nomination kit contains all the information and forms you will need to complete your nomination correctly. You can download an electronic kit from our website. A small number of hard copy kits are available from your local council. The nomination kits are available 2 weeks before the date that nominations open. In 2022, we encourage all candidates to nominate via the nominations portal on the EXA website. The portal is simple to use and gives you benefits that include the flexibility to save your application and come back to it at a later date, an automatic calculation of the length of your profile statement, and the ability for you to manage the upload of your photo. Although the portal is intuitive, we have also created a user guide that will also be available on our website to help you if you need it. There are 3 different categories of nomination forms. The first step in the portal is to ensure you select the correct nomination form for your entitlement. The categories are: a person who is nominating as an individual selects the Individual button. A person who is the nominated person on behalf of a body corporate selects the Nominated Person of a Body Corporate button. A person who is the nominated person of a group selects the Nominated Person of a Group button. It is critical that you choose the correct category. If you are not sure which entitlement you are nominating for, or if you need any help, please contact us for assistance. As part of your nomination, you must lodge a candidate profile. You can also submit a photograph that will be included with your profile. This is optional, but most candidates do provide a photo. Your candidate profile and photo will be printed on a profile sheet included in the voting pack, which is sent out to all voters. They will also appear on the EXA website. For your interest, here is how a name appears on the ballot paper. You can choose how you would like your name to be shown on the ballot paper, meaning you can use the name you are commonly known by if it is different to your enrolled name. For example, the candidate name could have been Joe rather than Joanne Cathy. You might be commonly known by your middle name. Joanne Cathy might be commonly known as Cathy, Kath, or Kate. Any of those would be acceptable. Your surname will be printed on the ballot paper in capitals, as shown in the example, apart from some prefixes if requested, and will appear before any other name. Some exceptions to the all caps are shown on the bottom line. For example, in regard to the prefixes of MC or MAC and Van der. Some exceptions to the all caps are shown on the bottom line. For example, in regard to the prefixes of Mc or Mac and Van der. Titles and honorifics are not permitted on the ballot paper. You might be a doctor, a justice of the peace, or have received an official honour such as an AO or OAM, but only your name will be printed on the ballot paper. You may include this in the body of your text. Please be aware that your nomination may be rejected if the name under which you nominate is obscene, frivolous, or has been assumed for an ulterior purpose. You also need to be aware that there are some restrictions on what you can include in your profile statement. Your profile must not comment on the decisions or actions that have been made or taken by the council, or on decisions or actions of past or present members of the council. It must be accurate and not misleading. It must not contain offensive or obscene material. It must not refer to another person who has nominated as a candidate for election to the council, either at the same election or any other election to be held on the same day, without the written consent of that person? If so, ensure you lodge the consent with your nomination and profile. If it is determined your profile has commented on council decisions or actions of past or present members of the council, the word comment is taken to mean criticism, value judgment, or endorsement of a decision about a council or council members. It does not preclude statements of fact that are neutral, but is intended to exclude commentary that is either negative or positive endorsement. Some advice on what is and isn't acceptable is on the screen now. The left-hand side displays comments which are not acceptable because the statement loses neutrality and becomes commentary. An acceptable version is on the right, and it says mostly the same thing, but is neutral and without either negative criticism or positive endorsement that often occurs when you attempt to include value judgments. Let's focus on the profile content for a moment. The profile statement is a brief overview that you will provide. It is an opportunity to tell voters about yourself and, if you like, why they should vote for you. Common examples of things candidates put in their profile include current or past work experience and qualifications, work or community interests, community involvement such as membership of clubs or boards, personal information such as marital status, children, and so on, and declarations of public policy and promises of public action. It is recommended that if a candidate has a campaign-specific website and/or a campaign social media page, these details be included in the text of the profile. This may help voters to make choices when voting. Your profile statement cannot be more than 1,000 characters. The portal will automatically calculate the number of characters for you. The profile will not include, as part of your 1,000 characters, the name, contact details, profile disclosure statements, signature, or date. Before lodging your nomination, it is recommended that you read the brochure LG13 entitled Requirements for Profiles and Photographs and read the checkboxes to ensure your profile is acceptable. Your profile must include the statement, "I take responsibility for the content of this profile." State whether you live in the area or ward in which you are nominating. State whether at the time of nominating or any time in the past 12 months you are or were a member of a political party. Include the name of the party and, if you are no longer a member, the date you ceased your membership. Include a single contact detail, which can be a street address, and not a post office box, an email address, or a phone number. Be signed and dated. If your profile does not meet legislative requirements, EXA will take all reasonable steps to notify you of the matter for you to address before close of nominations. If that matter has not been rectified by the close of nominations, your nomination will be rendered rejected. This is an example of how a published profile appears. Your name, as it appears on the ballot paper, will be printed above the profile and is not included in the word count. Titles and honorifics are only permitted in the body of the text. For consistency and fairness, each candidate will be allocated an equal amount of space on the profile sheet. This means that a candidate with a 100-character profile will be allocated the same amount of space as a candidate with 1,000 characters. Profiles will be printed in the same candidate order as the names appear on the ballot paper, with continuous text and in the same size font. Profiles will not include dot points, underlining, bolding, or entire words in capitals other than acronyms. If you are submitting a photograph, it must be the same size as an Australian passport photograph, unless approved by the returning officer. Predominantly show your head and shoulders, have been taken within the last 12 months, and be lodged at the same time as your nomination. When you upload your photo to the portal, you will be asked to declare that the photograph has been taken within the last 12 months. The quality of the photo provided will determine the quality of the reproduction. You can submit a photo in colour or black and white, though profiles and photographs are reproduced only in a black and white format. Photographs will be printed adjacent to your profile. If you choose not to submit a photograph, the words "photograph not provided" will be displayed in a square adjacent to your profile. The Requirements for Profiles and Photographs booklet available on our website has all the details. We will take all reasonable steps to contact you if there is an issue. However, if your profile does not meet the legislative requirements at the time of the close of nominations, your nomination will be rejected. We will contact candidates if there is a problem. Unfortunately, we often receive nominations that have not been completed properly, which then result in the nomination being rejected. Here are some suggestions to help you get your nomination correct the first time around. Lodge your nomination well before the deadline, so if there are any issues, there is time to make corrections. We strongly recommend you lodge your nomination at least 72 hours before the deadline. Ensure the contact details you provide are correct so that electoral officers can contact you if we identify a problem. If we do find an issue, we will contact you to discuss the issue and allow time to remedy. The candidate portal will be reset to allow you to return to the original nomination or profile to amend and resubmit. What happens once nominations close? Following the close of nominations, a ballot paper draw will occur to determine the order of names on the ballot papers. The time and place for the ballot paper draw will be advertised and candidates will be informed. The Deputy Returning Officer will publicly announce the names of candidates whose nominations have been accepted. Declare elected any candidates where there were less or equal number as there are positions. If more nominations than vacancies, conduct a ballot paper draw. If you have been declared elected, the Deputy Returning Officer will telephone to inform you and correspondence will be sent advising you have been elected. For a contested election, where there were more candidates than the positions to be filled, you will receive correspondence informing you of the names of candidates in ballot paper order, postal voting procedures and voting material mail-out dates, scrutiny and count details, a statement relating to publication of electoral material, illegal practices, campaign donations return, and movable signs, a copy of the campaign donations and large gifts returns, and a copy of the scrutineer authority form. Candidate profiles will be made available on the EXA website within 14 days of nominations close. Now let's move on to our next topic, campaign donations returns. Regardless of whether you are elected, under the legislation you must lodge certain disclosure returns with EXA. For now, we will summarise the key elements, and more detail is in the candidate handbook. A campaign donation return. This is where you must declare any gifts that you are given to assist you with or as a result of your campaigning. Even if you aren't given any gifts, you must submit a nil return. There are 2 returns to be made, one after the close of nominations and the second after the conclusion of the election. A large gift return. This is an extra return where you must provide details of any gift larger than $2,500. This includes multiple gifts from the same donor that together exceed this amount. In an election year, you must send in this return within 5 days of receiving the gift. If you are a candidate for the City of Adelaide, you must also submit a campaign expenditure return in which you disclose all the details of your campaign expenditure. If your expenses are less than $500, you must lodge nil return. You will make your returns via the candidate portal. Now let's move on to our next topic, campaigning requirements. This briefing does not include tips or advice on how to run a successful election campaign as a council candidate. If you are after some ideas on how to connect with voters, the Local Government Association's Make a Difference guide includes a section on campaigning. This guide is on our website. What we will now cover are your responsibilities under the law regarding any electoral material you produce. What is electoral material? The term electoral material covers a wide range of communications and products. It is anything created to affect the result of an election. Electoral material may be printed or electronic. It may be an advertisement, a notice, a statement, a social media post, a flyer, or a radio ad, just to give a few examples. Electoral material can only be published if it has the name and address of the person authorising its publication, the name and address of the printer or other person responsible for its production if they have a physical address. If they do not have a physical address, the name and email address or website will suffice. The address may be a post office box or business address, provided it is the usual post office box or business address used by the person. There are new regulations for publishing material on the internet. We recommend that, if you intend to do this, you read the detail in the candidate handbook. In addition to making sure you authorise all your electoral material, you must also be aware that it is an offence under the legislation to publish material that is inaccurate and misleading, have published a letter to the editor of a newspaper without the name and address, not a post office box, of the author of the letter. Candidates have been prosecuted and convicted for breaching the above legislation, both for failure to authorise and misleading material. So please make sure you understand and abide by it. Such breaches of the Act are criminal offences and carry fines of up to $5,000, and a conviction can and has been recorded. Changes to the legislation mean that you are prohibited from displaying any electoral advertisement, poster displaying electoral material made of corflute, plastic, or other material on a public road. This includes any structure, fixture, or vegetation on a public road. A $5,000 penalty applies. Signs can be displayed on private property with the permission of the owner and locations not deemed as roads. For guidance on movable signs, refer to the Local Government Act of 1999 and check your council bylaws relating to the design, display and removal of election signage. As mentioned, all campaign material published on social media must be authorised. Profiles, pages or groups must be authorised in the About page. Here are examples of how authorisations should look. Take Twitter for example. On an individual tweet, no authorisation is needed, but the authorisation has to appear on the About section. When you stand as a candidate, you must campaign fairly and within the law. On the screen now are examples of other illegal practices. These include bribery, intimidation, and violence, a candidate or scrutineer assisting a person to vote or obtain voting papers, disclosing how another person has voted, dishonestly influencing or trying to influence the result of an election, exercising a vote to which you are not entitled, opening an envelope containing a vote, except for an electoral officer, during the scrutiny and count process. You are strongly advised to read the legal provisions relating to electoral material and illegal practices forwarded to candidates after the close of nominations. Please remember that not only are your campaigning materials and practices a personal reflection on you, but if they are deemed defamatory or misleading, it may also jeopardise the entire election. Recent changes to the legislation allows the Supreme Court to declare an election void if they are satisfied that such practices have affected the result. If at any stage you wish to lodge a complaint relating to the election, head to the Feedback and Complaints page on our website. We deal with two types of complaints. Service complaints. Complaints about services provided by EXA or the operations of EXA. Electoral complaints. Complaints that allege a breach or breaches of provisions of either the Electoral Act 1985 or the Local Government Elections Act 1999. Alternatively, you can provide your complaint in writing addressed to the returning officer using the details on the screen. If the complaint relates to an opposing candidate's election material, make sure you include a copy of the alleged offending material, or if the notice is attached to a fixture, a photo of the material, including any authorization statement and the details of the location. Complaints will be acknowledged within 2 business days of being received. The next slide will discuss the voting process. Following close of nominations, if there are more candidates than vacancies to be filled, voting packs will be mailed to all eligible voters in the council area or ward. The voting packs contain a postal voting guide, a ballot paper, and a ballot paper declaration envelope, a candidate profile sheet, and a reply paid envelope. For a vote to be counted, the voter must fill out the ballot paper correctly and then place inside the ballot paper envelope and seal it. The voter must complete and sign the flap on the ballot paper envelope. Finally, if the voter intends to mail it back to us, they should place the ballot paper envelope inside the reply paid envelope and seal it. Once the voter has completed these steps, voting material can be posted to EXA or placed in the ballot box at the council office. Either way, it must be received by the close of voting. When envelopes are returned, they undergo a preliminary scrutiny where the envelope is checked and opened. Ballot paper envelopes will be rejected and the vote will not be counted if the elector's declaration is not signed or signed by an unauthorised person. The ballot papers are returned outside the ballot paper envelope. The ballot paper envelope declaration flap is missing, or if duplicates have been received. Voting material will be stored securely until the scrutiny. Under no circumstances will any declaration flap be removed from a ballot paper envelope by electoral officers prior to the scrutiny and count. On the screen is an example of the graph we will publish on the website. We will publish a daily total of the percentage returned for each council. Let's talk about the role of the scrutineer. A scrutineer is appointed by a candidate to observe the scrutiny and count process and ensure the process is fair and conducted in line with the law. It is the candidate's decision whether they wish to appoint a scrutineer. A scrutineer is not allowed to touch ballot material or influence or help an elector to vote. Keep in mind that any illegal practices that apply to you also apply to your scrutineers as they act on your behalf. To appoint scrutineers, you will be required to complete a scrutineer authority form, which will be forwarded to you following nomination close. Scrutineers must bring the completed form with them when they arrive to observe the scrutiny and count. Scrutiny and count details will be provided to candidates following nomination close. No more than 2 scrutineers per candidate are permitted in the scrutiny and count room at the same time. The final phase in the election timeline is the scrutiny and count. The declaration flaps are removed from the accepted ballot paper envelopes. This ensures the secrecy of the vote. The ballot paper envelopes are opened and the ballot papers removed by the electoral officer. This process can take several hours depending on how many envelopes are returned. Once all ballot papers are removed, they will be checked for formality. For a ballot paper to be considered formal, the voter must have marked preferences for at least the number of vacancies to be filled. For example, if there is 1 vacancy, the voter must have marked at least the number 1 on the ballot paper. If there are 4 vacancies, voters must number at least 4 preferences from 1 to 4. We use a quota system to calculate how many candidates are elected. This means that to be elected, a candidate must obtain a quota of formal votes. But what is this quota? The quota is unique to every election, and it is determined using a mathematical formula. It works like this. First, count the number of formal ballot papers. Then divide that figure by 1 more than the number of vacancies to be filled. Then add 1 to the final figure and disregard any fractional remainder. For example, say we accept 1,500 formal ballot papers for this election. There is only 1 position to fill, so the formula would be calculated as per the slide. 1,500 divided by 2, 1 more than the vacancy to be filled, then add another 1. This gives us 751. So, if a candidate received 751 or more first preference votes, in this example, then they would be provisionally elected. But what if no candidate reaches quota? If no one reaches quota, the candidate with the lowest number of votes will be excluded and their ballot papers will be distributed to the remaining candidates. The excluded candidates' ballot papers will be distributed according to the next available preference. In this case, second preference. We are looking for the number 2 on the ballot paper. If there is no second preference, the ballot paper cannot be distributed to any other candidate and becomes what we call exhausted, meaning it has no further preferences. Once all the excluded candidates' ballot papers are distributed, determine if any of the remaining candidates have reached quota. If yes, that candidate is provisionally declared elected. If no, the process is repeated and exclude the candidate who has the least number of votes. We repeat this process until one of the candidates reaches quota, or until only 2 candidates remain. If there are 2 candidates left and neither has reached quota, the candidate with the highest number of votes is provisionally declared elected. A couple of final points. This has been a simple explanation of quite a complex process. If you wish to learn more about the counting system, there is information in the Candidate Handbook and a video on our YouTube channel. A candidate who received the most first preference votes may not always be elected. This occurs because another candidate may receive more votes through the distribution of preferences. This can occur in a preferential voting system. Recent changes to legislation have streamlined counting for single vacancy elections, such as mayor. It still follows the same fair and democratic principles as counting for multiple vacancy elections, but has a simpler method for the distribution of preferences to the next available candidate. In 2022, for single vacancies, Following the first preference count, if no candidate has received the number of votes equal or greater than the quota, the candidate with the lowest number of first preference votes will be excluded, and all ballot papers received by a candidate following the first preference count will be grouped together and distributed as one parcel to the next available preference in the count, until a candidate either reaches quota, or if there are only 2 candidates remaining in the count, the candidate with the highest number of votes will be elected. Once the count is complete, a provisional declaration will be made and candidates will be contacted with the results. An unsuccessful candidate can request a recount within 72 hours of the provisional declaration. This must be made in writing to the returning officer with information supporting the request. The returning officer will determine the validity of the request. If there is reasonable grounds for a recount, it will be carried out as soon as possible, with sufficient time for candidates to arrange for scrutineers. Alternatively, the returning officer may initiate a recount. Scrutineers cannot request a recount. That brings us to the end of our briefing. We hope you have found this overview useful, and we always appreciate feedback. As discussed throughout this briefing, your candidate handbook should be your key source of information, so review it closely and remember to check out our website. If you have any questions about running for election or any other matter covered in this briefing, please contact us using the details on screen. Good luck!